a great necromancer known as the corpse god, finally falls on the battlefield. But instead of eternal rest, he awakens in an alleyway in modern-day Shinjuku, with a fatal wound on his neck. Trapped in the frail body of a freshly assassinated boy, can this god of death find the peaceful life he has always longed for? Or will he be dragged into a new battle for survival? In a horrifying moment, the sharp blade struck the armored warrior's neck, causing blood to gush out fiercely. He only managed a single, agonizing scream before collapsing. Amidst the chaos, the knight commander desperately ordered a retreat, urging the wounded towards the mages, but terror had already gripped the soldiers. They trembled, realizing the church's hidden treasure was approaching. The mysterious warrior's heavy footsteps grinding bones underfoot, signaling inevitable demise. Standing proudly with his back to the bleeding remains of the giant white dragon, the armored knight declared his presence. He proclaimed himself the Calamity Destroyer, one who had just concluded a fierce battle. While the cloaked warrior faced the violent tremors from the growling giant bone monster, elsewhere, the cloaked hermit realized a disturbing truth. She observed that the labyrinth continued to expand relentlessly even at this very moment. This was a chilling cavern, where a frenzied cadaverous beast resided amidst piles of white bones. This creature not only existed but also spawned countless other monsters, until they overflowed and spread terror to the outside world. That was the domain of the undead deity, an unparalleled necromancer with terrifying power. The image of a colossal skull with soaring curved horns symbolized the absolute dominion and demise he brought. The cloaked mage tensely warned that if the enemy wasn't defeated here, the world would be engulfed by hordes of zombies. Though the masked figure expressed doubt about Shigurua's chances of victory, the blonde girl held firm in her fervent belief that he would never fail. Amidst the fierce battle, Shigurua displayed an iron will, described as a man who never succumbs to demise. He swung his sword to parry the earth-shattering attack from the bone monster, creating a terrifying collision. The mysterious undead deity realized his opponent possessed the evil eye and questioned the souls that had been sacrificed. In response, Shigurua opened his haunting eyes wide, asserting that he could clearly see every single soul. Those around him discussed his innate ability to see spirits, a power known as the evil eye. If he wasn't careful, he would witness everything, from the souls of the thieves he had vanquished to even the smallest insects. The fate of those who possess the evil eye often branches in two directions, either becoming frenzied necromancers like the undead deity, or seeking salvation within the church. Most of them choose the latter path, dedicating the rest of their lives to prayer and seclusion. Two observers discussed the Calamity Destroyer, who, despite joining the church, still chose the path of battle. They called him a fanatic saint, as they witnessed the explosive energy surrounding Shigurua. The undead deity concentrated his power to create a magical shield, blocking the enemy's crushing attack. Witnessing such terrifying might, Shigurua realized his opponent's true nature in utter astonishment. With a decisive strike, the attacker shattered the colossal shell, forcing the enemy to reveal its true form. From within the rubble, a small demonic entity appeared, along with a brain confined within a jar. Shigurua furiously condemned the atrocities the enemy had committed merely to protect something so trivial. However, the giant skeleton coldly retorted that, to him, all lives were nothing more than mere playthings. The colossal undead deity stood towering amidst a pile of remains, making a chilling declaration. He asserted that both of them wore the mantle of the god of death, one who accumulates human forms into mountains. Encircled by intricate magical circles, the undead deity contemptuously dismissed all resistance as mere child's play. He unleashed a trembling surge of energy, demonstrating his superior power. A voice echoed, declaring an end to everything, startling Shigurua. He stared at the forming magical array, realizing with alarm that he knew absolutely nothing about this type of magic. The colossal magical circle spun violently, signaling the end. The mysterious one declared that the game he had played with his opponent was now over. Refusing to accept defeat, Shigurua roared with determination, vowing to stop the enemy as long as he stood. He plunged into battle with all his remaining strength. While Shigurua desperately cried out about the hopeless future of his country and its children, the white-robed woman bravely charged forward. She declared her help, rushing into danger without hesitation. A clock-shaped magical machine unexpectedly activated, causing Shigurua extreme pain. He screamed desperately while the blonde supporting character could only watch in shock and worry. In the pitch-black darkness, the protagonist tried to rummage through his vague memories. He vaguely recalled that, at that time, some kind of magic had been cast. Waking up in an unfamiliar setting, the protagonist looked up at the sky, squeezed between distorted skyscrapers. He wondered in confusion what strange place he was in. The protagonist realized he could move, but was immediately shocked when he saw his hands. They had become strangely small, making him unable to believe his eyes. The protagonist panicked when he found he couldn't speak. Looking around the narrow alley, he felt there was something wrong and bizarre about the ground and the surrounding walls. In a dark, pipe-filled technical area, a hidden character heard a strange noise. Their comments signaled the presence of something lurking. The protagonist stood frozen, blood still on his neck. He stared at the bustling modern city scene before him, completely unable to comprehend where he was. A drone hovered overhead, controlled by someone excitedly watching through a screen. Meanwhile, the victim with the neck wound could only wonder in bewilderment if this nightmare was real. Lost in the crowded streets with a wound on his neck, the protagonist couldn't understand what was happening. He wondered if this was a magical illusion, as the architecture and writing here were completely alien to him. Seeing a child's happy smile, the protagonist surmised this must be a peaceful land. However, that image only made him more tormented about the violent place he had once been. Held by the police, the boy mumbled incomprehensible words about the future, confusing the officers. Although he didn't know if he could return, his mind was still focused on something distant. The man in uniform pressed him with questions in a strange language, but the boy surprisingly realized he understood a little. Surprise was evident on his blood-stained face as the words gradually made sense. The protagonist speculated that he was extracting language data from the brain of this new body. At the same time, the police officer panicked, realizing the bloodstains on his clothes were real, not a costume. A loud noise startled the police officer. The boy turned to ask the newcomer's identity, and what met his eyes was the radiant smile of a red-haired girl. Immediately, the striped-haired girl pulled the boy's hand and ran, complaining about the troublesome police. The long-legged girl accompanying them sighed in relief, seeing the group had safely escaped. A man in the crowd adjusted his hat, eyes wide in astonishment. He couldn't believe the incredible speed the other group had just displayed right before his eyes. Escaping the pursuit, the sailor uniform girl laughed triumphantly, while the boy beside her looked relieved. They had successfully vanished into the bustle of the urban streets. Misaki Sakamiya excitedly introduced herself and asked the protagonist if he remembered her. Contrary to her enthusiasm, the protagonist only responded with an indifferent and tired expression. A joke about reading the girl's name backward unexpectedly triggered lost memories in the protagonist's mind. He clutched his head in pain as images of her began to flood back. The entity possessing the body realized that the original owner of this body definitely knew that girl. The proof was the body automatically reacting with a joyful laugh. Hung upside down, the protagonist stared blankly as items fell from his pockets, while the girl casually searched him. She nonchalantly called it a body search. Despite his bewilderment, suddenly pulled hard, the protagonist stumbled face first into the glasses girl's chest. While he cried out in alarm, the girl maintained an eerily calm expression. The protagonist held the other person tightly, surprised to feel their legs and body warmth. This tangible contact made him realize that life was clearly present. The schoolgirl cheered joyfully, asserting that he wasn't a ghost but still very much alive. The protagonist could only stammer his thanks, still reeling from his situation. Suddenly, the glasses girl's expression changed completely, her eyes swirling with a wild intensity. She growled a chilling question. "Then why are you still alive?" The protagonist's heart pounded as a premonition warned him of trouble. Looking at the radiant smile of the girl holding the drumstick, he secretly thought this situation was truly dire. The horrifying truth was revealed when the short-haired glasses girl, with a sinister smile and blood-stained hands, declared that she was the one who had ended the life of the body he was currently inhabiting. On the street, the girl chased the protagonist, loudly asking if he was Polka Shinoyama. The pursuit unfolded in broad daylight, attracting attention. In the server room, the blonde-haired man with glasses couldn't help but wonder about who hired the assassin Misaki. He found it hard to believe that the target was just a 16-year-old boy. The man with the eye patch smirked, delivering a chilling warning to his target. He emphasized that this time the victim must truly perish, otherwise his group wouldn't receive their payment. The protagonist desperately realized his only option was to flee. In this unfamiliar world, magical elements were too weak, and he could barely sense any spirits to call upon for aid. The situation became even more dire when he realized this body possessed almost no magic. This meant that any new injuries he sustained would not be able to heal on their own. With fragmented memories and a frail body unable to fight or use spells, the protagonist understood he was in a precarious situation. Just one more critical injury, and his existence would conclude. The girl looked down with a terrifying smile, declaring that the game of hide-and-seek was over. The protagonist could only look up in utter dread. After a nonchalant oof, the girl delivered a thunderous kick to the protagonist's back. The blow was so powerful it shattered the floor, causing the victim to collapse in agony. Laughing wildly, the girl launched an aerial assault, kicking the protagonist. Around them, countless sharp weapons swirled like a deadly storm. The protagonist struggled to dodge the blonde opponent's staff strikes. Although his mind reacted swiftly, this new body was too sluggish to keep up with his commands. The short-haired girl smiled radiantly, her eyes dreamy as if seeing a beautiful vision. To her, the blood-soaked battlefield filled with skulls before her was precisely the world she had always yearned for. The chase concluded with violence as the protagonist was impaled through the leg, collapsing with a cry of pain. Behind him, the glasses schoolgirl still charged wildly, a crowbar in her hand. The protagonist recalled images of his family, faces now blurred in memory. He admitted that, at the time, he could never have imagined things would turn out this way. Despite the blood flowing and the critical situation, the protagonist gritted his teeth with determination. He told himself he had come too far to give up now. The protagonist unexpectedly pulled out the knife and plunged it into his own leg, sending a fragment flying past the girl's face. This insane act made the short-haired girl exclaim in astonished admiration. His limbs unsteady, the protagonist bitterly admitted his first defeat. Though he had taken down countless formidable opponents, he was completely outmatched by the mysterious woman walking away. The deranged girl laughed loudly, confessing that she might be falling for the victim in a twisted way. Meanwhile, the injured protagonist could only hide behind the door, trembling as he listened to the terrifying laughter echo. The protagonist stepped into the desolate warehouse, unaware it was a trap. He was savagely attacked by the mysterious girls, collapsing to the floor with a bleeding wound before he could even comprehend what was happening. Crawling on the filthy floor, the girl revealed the horrifying truth about this place. It was once an execution ground for gangs, where victims were dissolved by science, and now rumors of ghosts haunt this place. With sad, swirling eyes, the girl with glasses whispered the reason for the desolation of this place. This dark past is why no one dares to venture here anymore. The red-haired girl enthusiastically praised the power of the mystical world, claiming that supernatural entities were far more interesting than the underworld. The protagonist agreed, revealing his glowing eyes that could perceive those supernatural entities. Amidst a room full of shadowy forms, the protagonist realized something important. Even though the monster's soul had vanished, he could still see human souls, proving his power still resided within this new body. The girl with glasses flashed a sinister, challenging smile, declaring that this time she wouldn't miss even a single gram, while a dark, murky liquid began to slither beneath her feet like an ominous sign. while the crowbar-wielding assailant sarcastically promised to respect his opponent. The mysterious girl immediately lunged forward with terrifying speed, dragging along horrifying shadow entities and roaring her intent to eliminate him. The braided-haired person in white summoned a swirling stream of dark energy around their hand, coldly warning the silver-haired young man sitting on the floor not to be so careless in the face of this overwhelming power. With a solemn face and blood profusely staining his shirt, the protagonist continued to speak thoughtfully about the gravity and responsibility of confronting a life. A slender arm reached out into the void, and at that moment, a hideous shadow entity rose from the murky black mire, beginning to speak of the fate of all lives. The colossal shadow entity, covered in countless eyes and mouths, surrounded the protagonist, brutally declaring that everything was merely its plaything while devouring him into the painful darkness. Suddenly, a black streak tore through the air, flashing past at terrifying speed, startling the red-haired girl with glasses, who could only react by raising her hand in astonishment. Without hesitation, the red-haired girl bent down and launched a fierce attack, using the colossal black bone structure emerging from her back to powerfully strike the target. A painful scream tore through the air as the orange-haired girl was slammed to the ground by a colossal skeletal hand. Blood splattered and her glasses shattered. Trapped between colossal skeletal fingers, the protagonist maintained a resolute and angry gaze, growling a warning to his opponent not to exploit them. The buzzing of the drone hovering overhead startled the VR-goggled protagonist, who looked up, his face showing clear confusion and beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Amidst the skeletal ruins, the blonde girl kindly inquired, noticing her comrade's pensive expression, and Sir Shigrua confessed his worry that he hadn't fully completed his mission. In the ruined cave, the giant proudly asserted the honor of the Calamity Destroyer, while another voice echoed, confirming that the undead god had truly vanished completely. Shigrua recalled the decisive moment, certain that just as his blade was about to strike, his opponent's teleportation magic had activated for escape. The armored knight was still full of doubt, questioning whether the necromancer had truly been vanquished. As the sudden disappearance of his soul through the evil eye still left many unanswered questions. The radiant blonde girl announced the good news from the church. All traces of the dead god's soul had vanished, and she unhesitatingly hailed Sir Shigrua as the hero who had saved the world. Despite receiving news of victory, Shigrua maintained a serious, pensive expression, softly uttering that he only hoped everything had truly ended that way. To regain his clarity, the protagonist frantically clawed at his neck until it bled, reassuring himself that his mind was now sharper. While the injured girl coughed up blood and felt her body overflowing with magic, the man in white turned his back, coldly declaring that his thoughts had finally become clear. The protagonist stood before the vanquished foe, wondering about the name Misaki-chan and why he wanted to eliminate this Polka Shinoyama body, but then unexpectedly thanked the villain. Standing amidst a swarm of grotesque shadow entities, the protagonist spread his arms, expressing gratitude for being brought to this place overflowing with magic and departed souls. Looking towards the bustling city, the protagonist secretly hoped this would be the ideal place for him to find the peaceful and quiet life he had always longed for. Standing firm on a puddle of inky black liquid filled with demon eyes, the protagonist declared an end to the game of hide-and-seek, admitting his opponent was right and asserting that he would never run away again. Surrounded by the colossal skeleton of the god of death, the protagonist was stunned to hear the pronouncement that from now on, they would both play the game of death. The protagonist bitterly admitted that those born with the demon eye, who see the departed, like him, could never dream of a peaceful and quiet life. Recalling a tragic past, the protagonist recounted being sold by his parents, becoming a bone-controlling sorcerer and wandering through blood-soaked battlefields long before the kingdom's downfall. The solitary bone-cloaked figure confessed that he hadn't even realized when he had become an undead being. Deep down, he only yearned for a tranquil life. In the dark stone cave, a member of the cloaked group awoke and was astonished to see a fruit basket woven from ribs placed right before them. The narrator recalled the days spent with the bone guardian god and the children, affirming that whether it was artificial or merely an act, he still cherished the faint memories of that peace. Warm images of gardening and cooking with the children appeared, depicting the Skull Guardian's simple wish for a tranquil home where they could bond as a family. The Skull Man gently touched the girl's sharp, blackened hand, concluding with sorrow that they had all been corrupted. Under the leader's command, the armored soldiers chanted the slogan Salvation, determined to free the souls and prevent them from falling into the hands of the wicked Necromancer. Amidst the gruesome scene of bodies impaled on spears, hooded guards wearing grotesque smiling masks declared they would bestow salvation upon the defiled children. Clutching the white-haired girl who had fallen from the rain of arrows, the protagonist painfully realized that the more he yearned for peace, the further it slipped from his grasp. The Avenger coldly admitted he had carried out a century-long vendetta, disregarding the tormented souls ceaselessly screaming and pleading for release through demise. The skeleton realized the coal mine where he was hiding had turned into a labyrinth of the living dead, as his own screams and dark magic inadvertently became a beacon attracting them. The colossal skeletal deity faced the armored warrior, confessing that he had waited centuries to find someone capable of bringing about his end, as he himself no longer possessed the means to self-terminate for liberation. Before the intricate magical diagram, the undead god revealed that he had successfully performed the secret reincarnation ritual, opening a new chapter full of mystery. Witnessing the devastating scene, the protagonist's fierce will to survive ignited. He resolutely declared he would never accept demise in this obscurity. Upon rebirth, the protagonist immediately prioritized safety, while bewilderedly wondering how many years had passed and which continent he was on, as this body was not like the relative he had targeted. The protagonist cried out in horror upon realizing the girl had passed away, as a pair of gruesome skeletal hands suddenly appeared, hovering right beside him. The young man stared in confusion at the girl held by the skeletal hand, unable to believe she was so easily incapacitated with just one stab and no recovery items. The protagonist panicked upon realizing the assassin's unusual frailty compared to back home, fearing that if she truly perished, he would have no recourse to prove he was merely acting in self-defense. Clutching his head in despair beside the girl's remains, the protagonist lamented the prospect of his peaceful life dissolving, and felt utterly insane for having inadvertently challenged a deceased body. The buzzing of the drone overhead further agitated the blond young man. He clutched his head, wondering if he had truly lost his mind. Collapsing from exhaustion in front of the computer screen after a mouse click, the blond young man was suddenly roused by a clear notification sound. Immersed in the virtual world, the blonde protagonist received a call from Clarissa and tensely informed her that he wasn't just in trouble. The entire system had completely crashed. From the bar, the waitress announced the video data transfer, and the young man, via his VR device, immediately ordered her to watch it and report back on the situation. Carrying the unconscious girl in his arms, the protagonist gazed in astonishment at the colossal spider monster in the city, bewildered as to whether he was hallucinating or if this was truly Shinjuku. In the blood-soaked room, the wild laughter of the bespectacled girl echoed, blending with the brutal rhythm as the masked man repeatedly plunged a knife into the unfortunate victim. With deranged, swirling eyes, the girl directly drove a drill through her opponent's hand, coldly questioning if he found joy in being punished for taking innocent lives. Pressing close to the trembling old man on the ground, the red-haired woman growled, asking if she now looked as content as he once did. Sitting atop the injured man, the bespectacled girl innocently asked if he was a good person, then stood up holding a gun, pondering things she couldn't quite grasp. A silence enveloped the space, heralding the coming events. As the reputation of the deranged assassin Zaki was mentioned, the girl received a new assignment and was surprised to see the target in the file was just a boy named Polka Shinoyama, brutally tormenting her victim. The red-haired girl smiled contentedly, telling herself she wanted to see just how wicked and insane she could become. Pondering from above, the bespectacled girl reflected on how no one was truly happy, and then a cold smile spread across her face as she realized the only thing she hadn't tried was ending her own existence. Like a dancer in midair, the braided-haired girl gently landed on the fence and glided along, leaving invisible musical notes blending with her graceful movements. A sudden greeting from the mysterious girl perched atop the fence startled the male lead below, who quickly clutched the wire mesh in astonishment. Standing on the roof of a tall building with black wings, Kuruya lamented to his comrade, while below, the girl was stunned to spot a strange figure and a drone in the sky. Over the phone, the bespectacled girl received the shocking news that the boy whose throat she had just slashed was still walking around normally as if nothing had happened. Unable to believe she had failed, the girl numbly received orders to continue the mission, while vaguely feeling that this conversation had somehow happened with Korapon before. The male lead awoke in agony, immediately meeting the calm gaze of the red-haired girl with glasses looking down and mocking his near-death experience. The red-haired girl's mysterious smile led to another scene, where men in suits were pointing guns at two children with expressions of bewilderment and confusion. Both the bespectacled girl and the male lead looked up at the mysterious figure who had just appeared, and a strange sound made the girl gasp in astonishment. Clarissa's sudden appearance stunned everyone, and in that chaos, the bespectacled schoolgirl suddenly rushed to embrace her teacher. In the red-haired schoolgirl's arms, her friend's body was ice-cold and utterly lifeless, a horrifying truth that left her stunned. With a radiant yet chilling smile, the one-eyed bespectacled girl gave a thumbs up, casually delivering the shocking news that the opponent was completely gone. As if he had just solved a difficult problem, the male lead exclaimed with delight, remembering the word zombie in this language to describe the creature before him. Despite the wound on his neck still oozing blood, the excited bespectacled schoolgirl raised her hands and cheered in the schoolyard. This peculiar action left the male lead standing beside her staring in bewilderment. The young man in VR glasses smiled and greeted the well-behaved children, revealing that he was using his free time to rewrite a small note instead of just sitting idle. Amidst the chaotic scene with the image of the injured girl collapsing, the male lead, covered in blood, led the group, secretly thinking that if anyone saw these lines, he might have completely lost his mind by then. Takumi Kuruya introduced himself as a kind young man who had chosen Shinjuku as his base of operations, sitting before a modern computer setup to assert his position. The man, who identified himself as a businessman and informant, confessed that even though he helped assassins conceal the remains, he always considered his life simple and humble. Standing before a grotesquely black-stained wall with his companions, the man in white couldn't help but wonder in shock why everything had turned so terrible, while the male lead knelt, trembling in fear, looking at the critically injured young woman clinging to life on the magic circle. A mysterious voice echoed with authority, declaring it would begin to repair her damaged form. Realizing the scene before him was not a special effect, the man in glasses froze in shock as he witnessed the victim violently burst apart, utterly horrifying the accompanying group, including the blonde girl. The male lead stood silently observing the motionless girl on the magic circle, a glimmer of hope arising within him that she would soon awaken after the crisis. With a bleeding wound on his neck, the male lead confusedly questioned the identity of those opposite him, while the long-haired girl coldly chambered a round in her rifle, ready for a fierce clash. The monocle girl recognized her opponent as Misaki's friend, and despite her initial purpose being to take over the contract and avenge her deceased friend, she hesitated for a moment. The female character in glasses contemplatively observed the victim's condition, questioning whether the girl was still alive, but found it difficult to give a definitive answer herself. In a peculiar gathering, the crowned queen appeared confused by the strange kingdom names the man mentioned, while the magician and the white-bearded old man eagerly discussed the existence of mages in other lands. Facing the shadowy figure and giant skeletal hand that enveloped them, the male lead looked in terror at the group of assassins restraining hostages, but the blonde female assassin merely sneered and sarcastically remarked that it was all just a collective hallucination. Eerie, glowing eyes stared intently at the male lead. At that moment, sharp swords emerged from a dark, viscous liquid, surrounding him in a terrifying display of power. While the female operative and her teammates prepared to face the opponent's whiplash, the bald commander frantically opened fire at what he called a monster, just as a brightly glowing magic circle appeared. A giant skeletal arm slammed into the ground, terrifying the onlookers, while the victim, with a deformed body, cried out in agony that they hadn't realized what had just happened. With sharp eyes and a trace of blood on his neck, the male lead looked down at his enemy, coldly uttering sarcastic remarks about the fragility and easy demise of human life. Tension filled the air as the armed man angrily confronted the group of armed women, while the blindfolded young man in the eye of the storm maintained an unusually calm demeanor. The masked adversary requested some time to think, but the blonde girl coldly dismissed the offer, while a drone hovered overhead, signaling imminent danger. The sudden appearance of a giant, cracking eyeball stunned the entire group, including the monocle girl, who couldn't hide their horror. The blonde girl unleashed a sword strike that pierced the monstrous eye, but then unexpectedly stopped her blade right next to the male lead, her eyes and those of her teammates shining with extreme worry. When tasked with guarding the target, the young man with the visor frantically protested, fearing he would escape, but the blonde man still gave the order resolutely, his eyes sharp and full of authority. Using a mysterious magical tool, the man shot off like a bolt of lightning, making the male lead realize with astonishment that this speed was even faster than when he had fled from Misaki. From above, the observer confirmed the location via drone as the raging flames engulfed the high-rise building, where firefighters were struggling to extinguish the fierce blaze. Standing before the remnants of the explosion he had just caused, the male lead calmly declared his ability to amplify the power of the evil eye with magic, leaving the boys around him silent and watching in fear. Amidst the sea of chaotic flames, the man with special senses could still feel the faint life force of the trapped children, but being surrounded by the crowd put him in a dilemma. The male lead surged forward with tremendous power, creating a fierce vortex that swept the entire group behind him into an uncontrollable journey. The panicked crowd looked up as the dark energy mass slammed into the building, and immediately, Zara and her friend recoiled as the malevolent power erupted right above them. Standing amidst the devastated ruins, the male lead stood speechless in shock, while a nearby victim was thrown to the ground, coughing violently in the thick, hazy smoke. Faint spirits appeared, pleading for help for 3 motionless children, leaving the male lead, despite his injuries, bewildered and questioning their identities. The fire spread unusually fast, leaving the crowd below stunned, and their fear intensified as they recognized dark, claw-like figures emerging in the smoke. At the epicenter of destruction, a colossal skeleton was slowly fading into oblivion, using its last vestiges of strength to envelop and protect the unconscious short-haired girl in its arms. While the red-haired girl trembled in fear before the skeletal shadow entity standing behind her, the blonde man, however, wore a smug, knowing smile amidst the desolate ruins. A skeletal hand reached out in despair, uttering a pained call for father towards 3 melting, dark figures who merely stood silently with their backs turned. A pitch-black skull entity suddenly formed from nothingness, unleashing tentacles that tightly coiled around the male lead, leaving him struggling to resist in utter terror. The male lead wielded his power, unleashing streams of dark energy from his body to pierce through numerous appearing magical circles, creating an intense magical confrontation. Feeling the warmth from her father's hand, the brown-haired girl's fever gradually subsided, but that peaceful scene weighed heavily on the male lead, who sat beside her, filled with sorrow and anxiety. A colossal skeletal hand suddenly tore through the wall, spreading terror among the children who cowered in fear before the destructive power of the shadow creature. While the firefighter carried the injured girl out of the sea of flames, the curious crowd continued to buzz about a frenzied creature they had briefly glimpsed lurking in the black smoke. Although everyone was safe, the one wearing glasses still couldn't hide his anger when mentioning the white-haired individual brazenly flying out of the building, causing a stir across social media with images of a moving skeleton. The light-haired man asserted that the other was a dangerous monster not to be trifled with, then calmly announced that Misaki was about to wake up, leaving his companions stunned and doubtful. Holding the red-haired girl tightly, the blonde girl was stunned to realize that the other's body was cold and lifeless, a revelation that left even the victim herself bewildered, not understanding what was happening. With an arrogant smile, the girl with the monocle declared a death sentence for the male lead, leaving him and all the surrounding witnesses stunned by such a ruthless pronouncement. Hung upside down in a bizarre acrobatic display, the girl with glasses was utterly bewildered, unable to believe she had fallen into such a perilous situation right in the heart of a modern, developed country. With his wounds bandaged, the male lead looked up at the sky, pondering and searching for peace in this unfamiliar land under the silent gaze of the white-haired girl. With his back to the listener, the male lead began to discuss the concept of peace, prompting the girl with the bun to cautiously inquire about the true intentions hidden behind his words. Faced with the male lead's bewildered expression, the girl with glasses smiled meaningfully, revealing that to achieve what was called peace, there was a prerequisite he absolutely had to fulfill. The blonde manager spread his arms proudly amidst a rain of money and drone surveillance, leaving the three men observing below in awe of this vibrant, materialistic spectacle. After the male lead bitterly commented on the power of money, the woman with glasses unexpectedly changed direction, looking directly at him and coldly questioning his true nature. Faced with the question about his dreams and goals in this town, the male lead, with a wound on his neck, could only widen his eyes and stare straight ahead, clearly confused and uncertain. Lost in this new world, the male lead conceived the idea of earning money using his unique ability to summon spirits, with a gigantic skeleton stirring to life beside him. When the male lead expressed an intense desire for power and absolute peace, the mysterious woman flashed a cunning smile, immediately offering a tempting offer of cooperation. Lisa Kuraki confidently introduced her consulting company in Shinjuku, while Polka Shinoyama was stunned to be informed that he was not the target this group was aiming for. Staring at her phone screen, the girl was horrified when the news report confirmed that the images of skeletons standing tall by the windows of the burning building were real. While the reporter cheerfully reported on the children's safety, the tech-savvy man with glasses broke out in a cold sweat upon discovering the silhouette of another giant skeleton hidden behind the smoke. Despite the blonde young man holding his head in exasperation, the braided-haired girl couldn't hide her extreme excitement, cheering loudly as she proved that monsters truly exist through the images on her phone. In the messy room where the skeleton was diligently carrying books, the VR glasses-wearing young man pondered thoughtfully, realizing that dangers were much closer than he had ever imagined. When asked how she felt sitting next to her killer, Misaki hadn't even had a chance to answer before the skeleton cheerfully interrupted, excitedly boasting that it was her first time experiencing being killed. The short-haired girl calmed her racing heart after the shocking event, then suddenly realized that Clarissa was also the owner of the building in front of them. Sitting amidst a pile of scattered books, the male lead sincerely thanked the man with glasses for his help, while confessing his severe lack of knowledge about this world. While the eyed monster cleaned the house and wondered about the reincarnated body's family, Gojo silently stared at the gloomy torture building, which might become his new refuge. Polka planned to deceive his family with a self-discovery trip for summer vacation, but his idea of sending postcards made the blonde man suspect it was a ploy to conceal his demise. The trio discussed the amnesiac young man, concerned that even if he remembered his family's names, they would soon realize the soul within that body was no longer the original individual. The calm young man explained that language was easily restored through repetition, but distant memories and specialized vocabulary required more time to extract from the brain. The cheerful atmosphere suddenly vanished as the straight-haired girl grew pensive, confessing that violent memories surrounding her own passing remained a deeply distressing haunting. Hearing the protagonist reveal his origin from 1,000 years in the future and the world's fragmentation, the bespectacled man, though astonished, was compelled to believe after witnessing the bone monster firsthand. The information that whales were merely mythical creatures and that the Geldwood cult didn't exist in the afterlife left the VR-goggled young man utterly bewildered and disoriented. Recalling the enemies who sought to eliminate him, the protagonist calmly recounted his past as a gigantic bone monster, leaving his listeners in stunned silence. While his chibi version shyly revealed the title of Corpse God, earning the braided-haired girl's admiration, his teenage self pondered, hoping that the cycle of hunting and being hunted would finally cease. Skillfully manipulating bones, the protagonist explained that the only reason she forgave and revived that dangerous individual who took a life was due to the request of this body's original owner. The VR-goggled man was stunned when the protagonist revealed that the soul they were searching for was right before their eyes. He looked up and horrifyingly realized Polka Shinoyama's soul had possessed his drone, explaining why it had completely lost control the day before. The young boy calmly explained that since the original body still had its soul, he was forced to possess the nearest object, and offered to temporarily borrow it until he found a new host, leaving the blonde man dumbfounded. The protagonist showed annoyance at being treated like a doll whose soul was constantly swapped, but helplessly admitted that his opinion now seemed to hold no weight with the blonde man. Holding the drone, the protagonist coldly acknowledged the view that human lives were nothing more than inanimate playthings. Observing from the shadows, the mysterious man silently affirmed the young man's danger upon recognizing that disregard for life. While the protagonist schemed to earn money quickly in exchange for a peaceful life, his light-haired companions secretly wished to escape and vowed never to let down their guard against the other. When the bespectacled girl wondered if she could become an assassin or a thief, the VR-goggled man argued that if she had eliminated him, it would be too easy, but he immediately warned the protagonist not to follow that crazy idea. Seeing the suited guest on the camera monitor, the blonde man deduced that he was looking for Misaki, startling the girl who was bewildered as to why anyone would seek her out. In a spacious, empty room overlooking the bustling city, the mysterious man in a black cloak revealed to his companion that there was a special assignment specifically for Misaki. A panicked man pleaded with Zaki-san to save his life from his pursuers, while two observers from the window surmised that he was asking her to deal with the very yakuza who were hunting him. Surprised to be found, the bespectacled girl intended to refuse the dark-haired man's request, citing other commitments, despite his frantic pleas about how dire his fate would be without help. To everyone's surprise, the protagonist, with a solemn expression, spoke up and accepted the job on behalf of the girl, leaving the man in the suit opposite him astonished by the swift decision. While the red-haired girl enthusiastically declared she would join if Polka agreed, the surrounding observers remained skeptical, wondering what the white-haired boy was planning by accepting the offer. Night fell, enveloping the desolate factory complex, where a mysterious voice confirmed intelligence that their target was sound asleep inside, signaling an impending assault. The girl with glasses calmly analyzed that this group of deranged killers were accomplices of the individual the black-haired man had encountered earlier, leaving him stunned as he realized the enemy's recklessness and madness. Witnessing the frenzied attacker repeatedly striking the victim amidst a pool of blood, the red-haired girl maintained a cold and pensive expression, thoughtfully comparing this brutal act to an old man she once knew. The girl with glasses deduced that this organization had degenerated into a motley crew of thugs and pickpockets, explaining why they no longer obeyed Clarissa's orders. Ambushed unexpectedly by the blonde man's attack, the red-haired girl timely dodged thanks to a stream of mysterious black liquid gushing from her arm, leaving her foe astonished. While the blonde young man was still confused by the discovery of a girl collapsed in the bushes, a fierce man suddenly appeared, pointed a gun at him, and snapped, demanding silence because his murmuring annoyed him. As he turned to say something to the protagonist, the man in the suit was suddenly gripped by an invisible hand around his throat from behind, allowing him only a pained scream before the sound of breaking bones echoed. When the person on the other end wondered if he knew this was a trap, the protagonist appeared naively flustered, questioning whether he should start the call with hello as proper etiquette. Amidst the chaotic scene of gunfire and conflict, the mysterious figure calmly thought that traps or enemy words were meaningless, because from the very beginning, he had simply accepted the assigned task. The boy, standing alone, suddenly firmly declared that he would defeat the wicked individuals who harmed his parents, leaving the middle-aged man and those present stunned by the determination emanating from his small frame. The young man was horrified to witness the middle-aged man being surrounded and engulfed by dark child spirits emerging from the ground, realizing that this was the work demanded by the vengeful spirits haunting him. While a massive rockfall descended like a hand of death, crushing the unfortunate ones below, the reddish-brown-haired girl hovered, laughing with arrogant delight, a stark contrast to the protagonist's utter terror, trapped amidst the rubble. The man screamed in despair and agony as giant bone structures constricted him, ceaselessly cursing those brats before the sound of shattering bones ended all his pleas. The braided-haired girl shouted, gathering momentum to leap into the air, while simultaneously, a pair of colossal monster hands delivered a terrifying punch, crushing the target below into dust in an instant. The protagonist resolutely declared he would not let anyone else perish at the hands of the monsters, while the dark spirits beside him wept, sobbing and whispering for their mothers in boundless sorrow. Looking at the arm reaching out from the bloody rubble, the protagonist bowed his head in apology and bitterly admitted that this act of destruction was not salvation, but largely just a way for him to vent his own rage. The blonde man refused to accept compensation via computer, while the black-haired girl couldn't hide her astonishment and joy upon discovering that the bullet wound on her chest had completely healed as if it had never existed. As the reddish-brown-haired girl boldly took off her top and declared herself a cold-blooded assassin, leaving the blonde young man stunned, the protagonist confusedly looked at his reflection in the mirror, wondering if all girls in this world so innocently shed their clothes. After the polite praise, the blonde young man inquired about the protagonist's reason for accepting commissions from the deceased, only to receive a philosophical counterquestion: whether he considered this life merely a game. The man in the cool visor glasses coldly stated that human lives, in the end, are just playthings for others, a view his two-toned-haired friend agreed with, yet seemed to harbor some lingering thoughts he wished to dispute. With a gentle smile, the protagonist softly revealed that he genuinely loved toys, for they brought innocent smiles to young children. Cradling the drone in his hands, the silver-haired young man decided to cherish these toys like treasures and vowed never to let them fall to an absurd fate. The man in the VR headset suddenly understood when the protagonist explained that the biggest difference in their value systems wasn't in their perception of life, but rather in how each of them viewed these toys. The female bartender wiped down the bar while on the phone, admitting that the recent situation was truly a mess and thanking Takumi-kun for his timely assistance. While underworld forces discussed canceling the pursuit order on Polka due to misinformation, henchmen were in extreme panic over the power of a monster, and a mysterious woman quietly remarked that they had made too many adversaries. The two men stood frozen in shock at the door, aghast as they looked into the chaotic room with scattered firearms everywhere and streaks of blood splattered on the floor. Despite trying to reassure himself that the monster couldn't have arrived first, as he approached the door, the black-haired man and his companions were still utterly terrified by the scene unfolding before their eyes. Staring at his colleague's blood-soaked, bandaged hand with mutilated fingers, the black-haired man couldn't believe his eyes, while the victim tried to deny the cruel reality with nonsensical delirium. Under the crescent moon in the deserted alley, the protagonist flipped through a book and was surprised to discover that this world also had legends about vampires. While the girl with glasses excitedly teased her book-reading friend about turning him into a vampire if she had magic elsewhere, the VR gamer dejectedly complained about how much real life resembled a game and considered a career change. The group of thugs gloated and laughed as they forced the young man to pay an exorbitant price of 60,000 yen for a beer, leaving the victim to only bow his head, trembling, and apologize for not having enough money. The luxurious scene of a club unfolded, with elegant gentlemen in suits relaxing and smoking, surrounded by waitresses in alluring bunny outfits. While the blonde young man slumped on the table, complaining about the bar's exorbitant prices, the bald man next to him excitedly revealed to the bartender a new establishment opening soon in the adjacent building. The blonde customer inquired about Clarissa's absence, and after hearing the bartender explain that she would start her night shift at midnight, he resignedly ordered a drink at a similarly high price. The blonde young man casually recounted rumors about human remains in the Shikuzawa building fire, causing the server to break out in a cold sweat and try to avoid the unsettling story. The blonde young man scoffed at people's fears, believing everyone eventually turns into skeletal remains. But his black-haired friend immediately countered with practical knowledge about embalming and decomposition. While discussing preferring to be a zombie over a mummy, the blonde young man made inappropriate advances towards the bunny-eared waitress, causing her to scream in alarm. Suddenly, a stranger with braided hair and a mask lunged and seized the protagonist's neck from behind, causing him to cry out in pain from the swift attack. Despite the server's weak reminders about the no-fighting rule, the masked man aggressively threatened to strike his opponent's face, while the one being held by the neck babbled frantically about eliminating zombies. While eating pizza, The cap-wearing young man pondered why Misaki was still in a zombie state an hour after being shot, making the whole group worried about the transformations her body was about to undergo. As the male lead explained the preserved body's self-healing ability and diminished senses, the boy beside him offered chilling advice about consuming raw flesh, which thrilled the braided-haired girl at the thought of becoming an assassin, leaving the blonde boy bewildered. Noticing an unusual sweetness in her mouth, the bespectacled girl glanced at the leftover pizza box and quickly deduced that her saliva now contained a potent paralyzing toxin. Just as the male lead finished explaining the paralyzing effect of a bite, the red-haired girl playfully lunged to test it, making him frantically shout Polka's name before collapsing. The bespectacled girl teased that the bite was just a love kiss. But seeing the male lead convulsing on the floor, the blindfolded boy couldn't help but exclaim in horror that such a physical reaction was not like happiness at all. The blonde boy angrily yelled, calling his friend 3D, and adamantly stating that he would continue to reject any conceited girl who believed her kiss was a gift bestowed upon men. Despite his visor-wearing friend shouting about misconceptions in dating, the blonde boy lay his head on the girl's lap with an indifferent expression, only wishing to sit up on a chair instead of lying in this position. Lying stretched out on the floor, wondering if that thing was here. The male lead suddenly snapped awake when he heard the commotion around him and remembered something. The mysterious cloaked figure displayed terrifying power, delivering a punch that shattered a giant rock into 1,000 fragments in the blink of an eye. A loud noise echoed in the night, making the hoodie-clad character look back, filled with doubt, wondering if the sound was truly just a gunshot. The blonde customer slumped onto the table in disappointment as his phone vibrated incessantly, lamenting that he had almost met Clarissa, leaving the server standing by with a look of concern. With a sinister smile full of malicious intent, the blonde man leaned close to the trembling man in the suit and whispered that this incident was truly a great pity. Standing before the computer system, the visor-wearing young man suddenly turned to ask Polka, who was peeking out the door, if his world used the decimal system like here. The male lead calmly explained the hypothesis about the origin of the decimal system based on humans' 10 fingers, a profound knowledge that greatly surprised and impressed the VR-goggled man. The VR-goggled man pondered deeply about the strange similarities between the two worlds, then questioned whether external spells would work just as effectively when cast within Misaki's body. While the male lead was deeply contemplating the mysterious connection between the two worlds to explain the strange phenomena, the bespectacled boy beside him broke the atmosphere with a naive question about his ability to paralyze cone snails with a bite. The group debated animatedly about using paralyzing toxins. While the male lead was still confused about the concept of cone snails, the bespectacled girl excitedly suggested combining punches and venom, but was immediately shot down by the blonde boy who said punching directly was faster than biting. With a radiantly eerie smile, the bespectacled girl excitedly shared her new, environmentally friendly method that helped her save nails, instead of having to use a nail gun to pin people to the floor as before. Hearing the male lead casually talk about incapacitating enemies, the visor-wearing young man was astonished and impressed by the opponent's skill in handling the remains and neatly interring those who obstructed them. When everyone was shocked to realize that the victims who had been dealt with were actually still alive, the blonde man quickly reassured them that the victims had lost consciousness and wouldn't be able to testify, while the white-haired girl merely shrugged indifferently. With a resolute gaze, the protagonist calmly declared that he had ensured those perpetrators would never again have the chance to harm anyone, as if to reassure his own conscience. A mysterious voice sarcastically remarked that the strong smell of alcohol on IWSN was merely to mask the smell of blood, while elsewhere, a rescue worker frantically justified their actions as legitimate self-defense against the fear for their life. Standing and observing the bullies lying unconscious amidst the wreckage, the protagonist thoughtfully placed a hand on his chin, his eyes reflecting understanding as he pieced together the entire sequence of events. Witnessing human bodies contorted into bizarre forms, the emergency response team was utterly horrified and bewildered. The investigator admitted that this illogical scene was far beyond their jurisdiction, perhaps only fitting for tales of supernatural mysteries. Tsubaki Iwanome, the third data integration manager of the Shinjuku Community Safety Division, appeared with an excited smile at the strange developments unfolding. Appearing beside her was her colleague from the same department, Kuzaburu Arrays, with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes.